Okay, picture this. You're just having a completely normal day when, bam, a throbbing migraine hits you right behind the eyes. Or, maybe you just twisted your ankle on your morning run. If you're like most of us, you probably head straight for the medicine cabinet and pop a couple of pills without a second thought. It's just something we do so automatically, right? But as those little tablets travel through your system, how on earth do they actually know how to hunt down and stop your pain? Well, welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unpack the fascinating and honestly surprisingly mysterious science behind our go-to pain relievers. And that brings us to a massive age-old question that sits right there on our pharmacy shelves. Ibuprofen or acetaminophen? What is the actual difference? Okay, let's dive into this. Because while we definitely tend to just use them interchangeably for our everyday aches and pains, the way they actually interact with our biology, it literally couldn't be more different. See, one is a perfectly understood chemical marvel, and the other is actually one of the greatest enduring mysteries in modern medicine. Section 1, the biology of pain. You see, to truly appreciate the cure, we first need to understand the mechanical cause of the pain itself. So it all starts with these things called nociceptors. These are special receptors scattered all throughout your body, and they respond specifically to potentially damaging stimuli. Think of them as your body's highly sensitive, built-in early warning system. Whenever you experience something physically harmful, like, say, grabbing a hot pan or getting a nasty paper cut, these little alarm bells are tripped, and they fire off an incredibly fast signal straight up your nervous system right to your brain. Let's actually map out exactly how this biological journey plays out. Step 1, an injury occurs. Step 2, those nociceptors we just talked about fire their rapid response signal. Step 3, your brain registers the signal, translating it into that universal feeling of ouch, that hurts. But it's step 4 that is absolutely crucial here. Before you've even fully processed the pain, your body is already hard at work. It triggers heat and swelling right at the injury site. Now, we know we usually view swelling as just a really annoying side effect, but it's actually a brilliant protective mechanism. By swelling up, your body is essentially trying to cast the injury, immobilizing the joint so you don't hurt it any further. And that localized heat you feel, that is just the result of increased blood flow, which is rushing a massive army of healing immune cells directly to the point of injury. But how does the body actually flip the switch to cause all that swelling? Well, your injured cells release a very specific substance called arachidonic acid. Deep inside your cells, a biological reaction happens where this acid meets up with two enzymes. They're known as COX-1 and COX-2. When they react together, they produce these chemicals called prostaglandins. So here is the big takeaway. These prostaglandins are the primary culprits. They are the chemical factory responsible for generating all that swelling, the heat, and ultimately that lingering pain you feel. Section 2, how ibuprofen targets pain. Now that we understand the chemical equation causing the pain, let's look at how our first contender steps in to solve it. And this brilliantly illustrates just how targeted modern medicine can actually be. Ibuprofen is what we call a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. It was originally designed to be exactly that, an anti-inflammatory. It works using this highly effective lock and key mechanism. Basically, ibuprofen rushes in and physically blocks one of the active sites on those COX-1 and COX-2 enzymes we just talked about. Because the ibuprofen is sitting right there, plugging up the active site, the arachidonic acid literally cannot fit into it anymore. And since it can't fit, those pesky prostaglandins can't be made. The whole production line is halted completely. As a direct result, the heat and the pain-causing swelling are significantly reduced. It's elegant, it makes total sense, and we know exactly why it works. Section 3, the acetaminophen mystery. Get ready for a major medical plot twist because we are pivoting sharply to our second contender. Let's take a quick look at the timeline of both these drugs. Now, you might assume that because we don't fully understand it, acetaminophen must be a relatively new invention, right? Actually, it's the exact opposite. Acetaminophen was first discovered way back in the late 1800s, and it officially hit the commercial market in 1955 when it was introduced as Tylenol. Contrast that with ibuprofen, which wasn't even discovered until the 1960s and only went over the counter in 1983. So acetaminophen has quite literally been in our bodies and on our pharmacy shelves for generations. But here is the mind-blowing twist. We know for a fact that ibuprofen is an anti-inflammatory that stops prostaglandins through a perfectly known mechanism. Acetaminophen, on the other hand, is a totally different story. It is not an anti-inflammatory drug, and despite it being discovered in the 1800s and being consumed by millions and millions of people every single day, nobody is entirely sure how it actually works. No, I am not kidding. We have this globally utilized everyday medication, and the scientific community still marks its primary mechanism of action as literally unknown. Crazy, right? Section 4. Theories behind the mystery. It's time to shift into detective mode and see if we can finally solve this case. So, who exactly are the main suspects here? Let's move to and see how this builds out the leading scientific hypotheses currently trying to solve the acetaminophen puzzle. We've got 4 major theories on the table, so let's walk through the evidence for each one. The first major suspect actually emerged in 2002, when scientists in England discovered a completely new COX enzyme. They creatively labeled it, you guessed it, COX-3. Now, what's really fascinating here is that this enzyme is found predominantly in the brain, and it appeared to be much more sensitive to acetaminophen than other pain medications. It seemed like the absolute perfect answer. Like maybe acetaminophen just specifically targets this one brain enzyme. But there's a pretty big catch. Unfortunately, this mechanism has really only been proven true in tests with other animals. We just haven't been able to conclusively prove that it works exactly this way in humans. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how our second theory looks at the enzymes we already know about, just from a totally different angle. Remember COX-1 and COX-2? Well, they actually have 2 active sites. We know arachidonic acid binds to one of them, but there's this whole other site called the peroxidase site. This site leads to the production of something called a tyrosine radical. So this theory suggests that acetaminophen might actually be sneaking in and binding to this alternative secondary site, effectively preventing your body from making this specific compound and thereby magically relieving your pain. But listen, if you want a really surprising theory, we have to look at some wild research coming out of Lund University in Sweden. They think acetaminophen might actually work on the endocannabinoid system. If that word rings a bell, it definitely should. Yes, this is the exact same biological system that responds to cannabis or weed, but it's not just sitting there waiting for that. It's a completely critical system involved in regulating a massive variety of your body's everyday processes. We're talking appetite, mood, memory, and super importantly for us today, pain sensation. So these researchers in Sweden claim that acetaminophen actually activates 2 specific ion channels in your brain and spinal cord, channels that also happen to respond to certain cannabinoids. But here is the crazy biological paradox with this one. Normally, activating these specific channels actually triggers pain and itch responses in the body, so it seems completely backwards that activating them would somehow reduce your pain, right? Well, hold on, because they might be onto something huge. Another study published in the European Journal of Pharmacology proved that if you chemically block cannabinoid receptor type 1 in mice, acetaminophen completely stops relieving their pain. Boom. So there's undeniably a really strong yet incredibly complex biological link happening there. Now, there are a few other theories floating out there too, like the idea that acetaminophen might actually be working on our serotonin receptors to literally alter our perception of pain. But the honest truth, who really knows right now? Science is this ever-evolving, ongoing process, and even for a drug as old and ubiquitous as acetaminophen, it is so clear we still have a ton of research left to do. So the next time you open up that medicine cabinet, you aren't just looking at boring old pills. You're looking at a literal triumph of biological engineering sitting right next to an enduring, century-old medical mystery. Which brings us to the ultimate question for you. Knowing all of this, which one do you actually prefer? Ibuprofen, the targeted, perfectly understood mechanic, or acetaminophen, the mysterious, age-old cure? Does one actually work better for your body than the other? Definitely something to think about the next time you need a quick fix.